So this is a drawing I started some time ago, and I thought I would get back to it. I showed these the other day in a video. I did a series of pencil drawings. They were intended to be illustrations for a prose project I was working on. And I set them aside probably because I set the writing aside. I decided to go back a little further in the timeline and tell another story, but not wasted effort, because I'm getting back to it. I'm going to actually revise those chapters that I've created and see how they turn out. Problem wasn't the actual events that happen in the story. In fact, this story is really kind of a retelling. It's kind of a retelling of Yarn Man #1, which is an interesting comic book from the 80s. It would have been the 15th issue of Megaton Man, except for the fact that the publisher only wanted to publish #1s at that point to maximize sales to collectors. I did not. I was not thrilled about that, to say the least. And I've blogged about that lately, and I'll have even more to say when we do the collection. We're collecting all of the kitchen sink comics. But to make a long story short, I had done 10 issues of Megaton Man, and from 1984, December of 84. The first issue is cover dated November of 1984. But it actually came out in December. It was a little late, through no fault of mine. It had been sitting around for quite a while. But anyway, and then issue 10 came out in the summer of the late spring of 1986. Followed by Bizarre Heroes #1. I did 10 issues of Megaton Man. I did 7 issues of Bizarre Heroes, and then, using my pencil sharpener, this is an F pencil. It's kind of a medium, not too hard, not too soft. It's a little harder than an HB, and I've already drawn out the underdrawing in blue pencil, and I'm kind of just tightening it up in graphite right now. And as I showed you in the last video, let me show you an example of these. These are 11 by 17 Bristol board, and just pencil on Bristol board. What I did, if I can find the printout, maybe I can't. I scanned them in and I darkened them up, and I thought this might be a nice effect for a literary prose project. You can see the darkened lines. I can't find the one with Clarissa, but anyway, getting back to the numbering. So I wanted to call it Megaton Man 11. I'd only been gone for like 6 months when I got an idea for it. Publisher was enthusiastic, but Then they started squawking about having to renumber it. And I told them, well, first of all, I said, that's going to mess up my brain. I'm not going to be able to keep track of the number of how many comic books I've done. I'm going to have to justify that new number one with a special event of some kind. I just want to do, just want to continue the series. I don't want to be thinking about launching a new number one every time I want to do another issue of Megaton Man. I was doing lots of stuff at the time. I was freelancing. I couldn't pay the rent with the kitchen sink stuff. Anyway, it became a very, very nasty exchange, and the publisher basically bullied me into accepting this new number one scheme. So we did, instead of 11, 12, and 13, we did Return of Megaton Man 1, 2, and 3, followed by Megaton Man meets the Uncategorizable X-Thems number 1, followed by Yarn Man. So Yarn Man would have been the issue 15. And this illustration is essentially a prose retelling of Yarn Man number 1, or Megaton Man 15. And the reason that's important is because this is all taking place in Ann Arbor. The characters you're looking at here is Clarissa James, she's Ms. Megaton Man here, and here's Simon Phloog, and here's the cape. Here's Ms. Megaton Man's cape, and everyone is in Ann Arbor. Stella Starlight, the See-Thru Girl, former See-Thru Girl, is going back to college. She's had this little boy. This is his 5th birthday party, and what he's doing, he's on his bed here. This is his bed. He's got some birthday gifts that he's wrapping in Sunday Funnies. And these are his birthday gifts. One of them is something that his father, Trent Phloog, Megaton Man, got for him. And another item is something Preston Percy got for him. And he's got to wrap these up. It's all explained in the story, but he's got to wrap up these gifts, and then he's got to pretend to act surprised when he opens them up at his birthday party. Now, this is a little bit of a retcon because in Yarn Man number 1, if you recall that comic, you can find bootleg scans of it online. But Yarn Man number 1, there's a backyard picnic. It takes place at the house in Ann Arbor, and all kinds of characters appear on the time turntable, and the retcon part of it is in this prose story that I'm retelling of that day. It's actually Simon's 5th birthday party. So all of the mayhem that we saw at the picnic really started, it really began as a birthday party for Simon. So it's a little bit of a retcon, but not that you would notice, I don't think. I'm not trying to correct anything that happened in Yarn Man. There were some narrative glitches in Megaton Man, in Yarn Man number 1, and part of it was because, quite frankly, my relationship with my publisher was deteriorating. As I say, that should have been the 15th issue of Megaton Man. There could have been a lot more Megaton Man comics at Kitchen Sink Press. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because Fantagraphics is putting together a collection of the Megaton Man comics, and Volume 1 is basically all of the kitchen sink stuff. Those 10 issues, 1 through 10, that appeared, and then Return of Megaton Man 1, 2, and 3, which I'd wanted to call 11, 12, and 13, and 14, which was Megaton Man meets the uncategorizable X-Thems, and of course Yarn Man #1. And again, the thing I've been thinking about recently is just that there could have been just so much more comics, whatever the number. Who cares about the number, really? In my view, the publisher had accepted Megaton Man 11. They turned around and they made a big stink about it's got to have a #1 or we can't sell it. And there was a lot of name calling. You can read about it online if you don't believe me. But it became a very toxic and verbally abusive situation. And the creative part, I wish I could say that none of this affected the creativity, except that it did. And I was kind of losing my focus by the time I was doing Yarn Man. Yarn Man #1 is a fan favorite. Lots of people love that issue. There's a lot of good things in the comic, but the fact is I was really kind of rushing through it to get it done. I kind of wasn't paying attention to a lot of the narrative details, particularly the age of Simon. In the previous issue, the Megaton Man meets the uncategorizable X-Thems #1, which I was going to call, at one time I was going to call it the Golden Age, original Golden Age Megaton Man. Same cover, but different logo. In that issue, we see Clarissa, who's babysitting Simon, and he seems to be like maybe a year old or less, just a toddler, 18 months or maybe even less than a year old. And in the very next issue, which is Yarn Man #1, he's suddenly about 6 years old, 8 years old. I was never very good at capturing the precise age of the kids. Not having kids of my own. And so I've had to kind of make up my mind. You can call it a retcon if you want to, but I've had to kind of make up my mind, and I've just decided, well, that was his 5th birthday party. So I've had to kind of go back and fix up some of the narrative glitches in that issue. My thinking is that that issue, we're talking about Yarn Man #1, it was there was a picnic in the backyard, kind of and it turns into a mega hero brawl. People come in on the time turntable. They crash into the neighbor's pool. Everybody shows up. The See-Thru Girl has to turn naked to get everybody's attention, tell them to shut up because the cops have been called because they're raising a ruckus. Anyway, to make a long story short, because of the production schedule I was on at the time, I was doing freelance comics, I was doing assignments for DC, I was probably doing stuff for Mirage, some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stories that I was doing as a freelancer. And I was going to conventions, and I remember distinctly when I was drawing Megaton Man #1, and this is, not to make excuses, although I am making excuses. I took off, and I went to the Chicago Comic-Con, and I went to San Diego, and I had plotted out Yarn Man #1. I remember writing it on legal pad. And one of these days I'll dig that out and show you on YouTube. But I had plotted it out, and I'd taken Bristol board like this, 11 by 17 Bristol board, and I'd even drawn out the panels, and I'd kind of sketched out with stick figures the whole comic book. And then I set it aside, and I had to go off to do these conventions. So I went to Chicago, as I did every year. Went to the Chicago Comic-Con, the old Rosemont, Ramada O'Hare. And then I went a couple weeks after that, maybe even just the same weekend. I don't remember. This would have been 1989. Off to San Diego, flying to San Diego. And by the time I got back, it was almost a month between all these shows, and probably turning in a couple of other freelance assignments. And by the time I got back to Yarn Man, a month had passed, and I had my legal pad, and I had some stick figures on some Bristol board, and I swear to heaven, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what I was doing, or what I thought was so funny, or anything. I looked at this stuff, and it wasn't anything penciled like this. It wasn't tightly penciled. It wasn't blue penciled. It was just literally stick figures, just scribbles, and a few sentences written basically on the back of an envelope. And we had already announced the comic. I had painted the cover. It was my only acrylic painted cover with Yarn Man, this close-up of his face. And it was supposed to be going to the printer. So I had to think in a hurry, and I had to really letter it and reconstruct it. And there were some scenes that it's like, I don't remember what the point of this scene was. And I had to kind of reinvent it and rethink it and rewrite it. Anyway, it came out the way it came out. It's a little rushed. It's a little sloppy in spots. It does have lots of memorable moments, and it's one of the it's maybe the only comic book that really takes place completely in Ann Arbor. And it takes place in the backyard, and there's lots of memorable things about it. It's kind of, I like the fact that it's in black and white. It has a kind of an underground feeling, and it's a little bit, it's maybe the only example of what could have been at Kitchen Sink Press. I thought the Ann Arbor storyline was something very rich, and it was, I was feeling my second wind on Megaton Man when I came up with the Megaton Man 11 storyline, only to have this incredible interference and static and blowback and name calling from the publisher. Read all about it online. I've posted actual correspondence from the era, so you can read in your own words what a miserable punk I was, according to the publisher. But the upshot creatively was that I kind of lost my focus, and it came out the way it came out. But I'm still at it. I'm still relatively healthy, except for my cough, my persistent cough. Which is from my CPAP machine, basically. But I'm still penciling, I'm still thinking up new stories, and this is an attempt to go back and reclaim some of that. It's a little bit of a retcon, as I say. There's a little bit, I'm a much older, much more mature creator now. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing off screen here. But two toes here. The thing about stories is they don't really age. They don't. You can go back to the 80s. You can go back to a character. And even though I'm doing new stuff, I'm doing new comics that are taking place much later in the storyline. Here's Simon. He's about 5 years old. He's kind of the barometer or the chronometer of